The cold creeps. I live in a rather rural area, the kind of place where you both know what to expect and what not to expect. People here tend to be latched onto the older way of thinking and living, and I'm all in for that. That being said, it is easy to assume that nothing much happens here. At least nothing that would really raise any red flags. The thing is, about 5 years ago, something abnormal happened. 5 years ago, I thought I was going to lose my life due to a case of wrong place, wrong time in the parking lot of an all-you-can-eat buffet. I was in middle school at the time and was having one of my worst school years yet. Luck didn't seem to be on my side, so of course this day wouldn't be any different. My family, my grandpa, mom, and little sister had gone to church that morning and taken my friend and her younger sister as well. Once it was over, my mom decided that we would treat ourselves to an early lunch and headed over to a local all-you-can-eat buffet. It was a humble place, and the atmosphere of the farm around it was peaceful. It lulled you into a sense of security. We were waiting in the lobby area, sitting on a bench, when two women came in. They both seemed to be in their 40s. The taller woman was obviously the leader of the two, and the shorter one seemed to hang back, letting the other one do the talking, chiming in here and there. The taller woman was gushing over how adorable my sister was to her. She was in elementary school at the time, and kept saying how she looks like a princess. We thought she was just an overly expressive and nice woman, and left it at that as we walked to our table to get settled in. Fast forward, and we are eating dessert. I had gotten my usual, that being a mixed vanilla and chocolate ice cream, topped off with Oreo bits, caramel, and 2 marshmallows covered in chocolate from the chocolate fountain. Yes, I know, I kinda went overboard, but whatever, I was a kid. I was about 3/4 of the way done with my dish when the two ladies suddenly appeared at our table. I immediately thought it was odd that they deliberately searched us out in there, but kept eating. The lead woman got to talking about herself and revealed she was a church official. She claimed to work in a sort of crisis center at her church located in Delaware. She mainly worked with kids who were the victims of abuse or assault. Her friend, I cannot remember whether she actually told anything about herself, but if she did, none of us can recall it. Then they told my mom and grandpa that they had a gift for my sister, and I admit I was kind of jealous upon hearing that. Of course she was getting a gift. The woman pulled some letters out of her purse and showed them to my mom and sister. She told us that she was pen pals of a sort with Princess Kate. I later would learn from my mom that the letters were basically automatic replies, not actual letters from Kate herself. so nothing special really. It's like the equivalent of getting the answering machine to a secretary in the mail, but nonetheless, my mom went along with it. Then, to my surprise, the woman said she had a gift for me, but unlike the gift for my sister, which had been in her purse, she said mine was put in her car. Red flags immediately went up in my head. There was no way in hell I was going with this random lady alone out to her car. My mom, to this day, I have no idea what she was thinking. Told her that I could go, so long as my grandpa went with me. My grandpa gave my mom a "What are you talking about? Why should we go with them?" look and turned to me. I hesitated, but we walked out with the two women. At this point, knowing the head woman was a church official, I figured she was going to give me a Bible or something. My grandpa, in his late 50s, seemed uneasy and stuck close to me. As we approached her car, I saw that it was in fact not a car at all. It was a van, a white van. Cliché, I know, but it's the truth. We followed the two women over, and the leader walked over to the passenger side. We were right behind her, but had failed to notice that the other woman lagged behind and placed herself between us and the exit between the van and the other car. The woman was in front of us, meaning we were boxed in. No way out. The leader unlocked her doors and pulled open the sliding door, ducking inside. My grandpa seemed to tense up, his eyes darting around. He had noticed the other woman was blocking us off and was on edge. He had a bad feeling about this and was fully prepared to fight these women to save me if need be. Then something that I never would have dreamed of happened. The woman, after rummaging around in her van, emerged wielding a sword, and not some fake prop sword that you get at Party City or something. A legit sword, glinting in the grey autumn light, its hilt adorned with details and jewels. I just about crapped my pants. I thought this was the end. I was going to die by the blade of some psychotic church official in the parking lot of a rural buffet. My grandpa's eyes went wide, and I saw his hands clenched into fists, and he prepared to knock this woman out. They seemed to go in slow motion, taking forever, but was only a few seconds. And then, as my life flashed before my eyes, this woman asked us what our names were. The sword was still in her hand, but she didn't swing it at us. I was terrified, thinking this woman was the kind of killer who likes to know her victim's name before doing the deed. I told her my name. She then performed a small ceremony, reciting some religious statements, and lowered the blade to touch both of my shoulders, one at a time. She then brought it down to my head and raised it, bringing it in front of herself, straight into the air, and proclaimed me, "Sir, a knight of God." She asked the same of my grandpa, and after getting his name, did the same for him. She told us that she hoped we liked our gifts, and still shell-shocked, we thanked her, and my grandpa and I left the two women. We speed walked inside, found our table, and proceeded to fill my mom in on what just happened. She didn't believe us at first, but we soon convinced her. My grandpa and I both scolded her for making us go with those women. My grandpa was especially angry. If that woman had other intentions with that sword, we would both be dead. The women didn't come back over to us, and oddly enough, we didn't see them when leaving. We never saw those women again, and I'm glad for that. They weirded me out, and I just hoped they went back to Delaware where they belonged. Maybe they could knight other random strangers along the way. It's been half a decade now since the day my grandpa and I were proclaimed knights. My close friends sometimes refer to me as Sir, which I find funny. I never let my mom live that down either, prodding her about it whenever I get the chance, all in good fun of course. It's also a fantastic story to tell people and get them interested in you, and no one I've met has been able to top me when we get to sharing. Now, one last thing that has always lingered in the back of my mind, something that still unsettles me to this day. About 2 weeks prior to this event, there had been some beheadings a few states over that had made the news. It makes me wonder, could it have been those two women? Was I knighted by a murderer? Creepy Thanksgiving driver. I'm 30 years old, female, and a current student in nursing. 2020 Thanksgiving went from exciting to creepy for me. It started off with me passing an exam at 86%, spending a pre-Thanksgiving with my boyfriend and his family. This particular night, before Thanksgiving, I spent at my brother's house. I left for home around 8 a.m. I woke up exhausted, but my mental state turned manic. I was awake and wanting to get my sister a surprise gift from me and her kids. Because she hadn't replied, in my manic state, I decided to go to her house. The day was fun, a lot of food, booze and dancing. I loved it. Around 6 p.m, I planned my trip out to my boyfriend's temp house. We got into a bit of an argument, as I told him since it was a 3-hour drive, I would start out around 1 a.m. He didn't agree with this, as he thought it would be too late and darkroom travel to a rural area, which prompted me to remind him I'm a grown mistake. He became a bit nerved and upset. However, later we agreed on my arrival. The festive went on at my sister's, alcohol fun, Thanksgiving family pictures and food. Around 11 p.m, I decided to take a nap. However, my manic brain thought to shower. Due to me needing help with running the shower and attempts to fix my hair, I ended up laying down around midnight. I decided to sleep until 1 a.m. However, I ended up passing out for over that time frame. I set an alarm to wake up at 1, but of course I slept through it. I was woken up at 3:30 a.m. when my sister asked me, "Why didn't you leave?" I woke up and desperately moved as fast as I could out of her house. I left my phone and had to turn around and go back. Once I retrieved the phone, I was on my way for a second time. I ended up going the wrong way as I mixed up two cities' names because they both started with CH. Once the GPS was on and I realized I was going in the wrong direction, I was on my way. The first hour seemed to be frustrating, as at that time I thought I left my vape pens. Thanks to my sister telling me I left my pens, which she meant actual pens, not her fault but mine, although I found the vape pens 2 days later in my purse. Once leaving the city lines of Sacramento, I got into a race with a Silverado that was lifted, and my jealousy that I was in a SUV versus a beautiful truck, I decided to take on the race until I reached 120 miles an hour for about 10 minutes and decided it wasn't worth the ticket. At the time it was only me, the Silverado, and a fellow Ford on the road. About 5 minutes later, the Silverado took an exit. Now it was only me and the fellow Ford in a rural, dark area. During the drive, I noticed the Ford was on the side of me, and at one point seemed to be close enough on my right side to swipe me. Due to my blindness in the dark, I was most focused on making it safely, and not focused on the car that seemed to even cut off other cars to be on the side of me. This was only a 2-lane road in one direction, so you can understand why it wasn't a bother. We made it to a small town. That meant taking a major street for about 3 to 5 miles, going through stoplights. At one point I thought, damn, I hate it when people are too close to me. It was annoying to me, but after 2 lights, the fellow Ford turned off, and I felt a bit childish for even caring. 2 to 3 lights down, as I made it through the green light, I noticed a car turning onto the street. It was the same car, and at this point my body started to shake as the car made sure it was back on the right side of me, keeping up with persistence this time. My head began to hurt, and at first I didn't understand the fear was kicking in. Why would this car come back to the main street? There are only 3 other cars, and he's the only one on the side of me. The fight or flight response began to creep up on me, and I didn't want to turn my head as if I noticed. In that moment, I didn't want to call my boyfriend. What if I'm just paranoid? I thought. I have traveled alone for longer distances at night before. Is alcohol still in my system? My boyfriend and mom will lose it if I call them. Why is this happening? Don't panic. In that moment, I saw a light turning yellow as we approached side by side. My brain went into rationalization and thought, don't panic, stay calm, ignore the headache. When the light turns green, stay, see if he goes. We approached the light and stopped. The light seemed to be much longer than the others. I moved my eyes towards the fellow Ford on the side of me. The windows were lightly tinted, but I could see a hat and a person looking towards me. Then, seconds later, look up at the light and then peer back into my passenger window. My head and heart began to become one, both in pain and fear. Then the light turned green. There were 2 cars behind us, but I stayed on my brakes. I didn't move, and I didn't see his car enter the intersection either. I turned my head to look, and I could now see more of the silhouette of the man's face under the hat staring at me. I took off slowly to collect my composure and not seem to be scared, and so did he, keeping my pace of slowly going through the intersection. I heard a car behind us beep the horn, and it was like a light switch. I noticed a truck in the distance through the last light that was making it through the abyss of the rural highway that was only a 1-lane road. I decided to speed up to make the last light, but so did the fellow Ford, keeping up with my pace. It seemed that he was trying to cut me off, but I went from 45 miles an hour to 65 miles an hour. The trucks were going slow, and now he was behind me, and so close that I couldn't see his lights in full. In panic, I went off the side of the road as to pull off to pass up the truck, and so did he. When I noticed he passed the truck and was still just as close behind, I noticed the second truck. I sped up to 90 miles an hour and went towards the left, which was into incoming traffic, to cut off the truck. My rationalization was to speed, and even if I was pulled over, I'd be safe, I hoped. I cut the big rig truck off and began to speed up, now able to see far behind me in the distance through my rear view mirrors. I could see the car trying to cut the truck off to the right and left, but cars were oncoming in the opposite lane, and due to trees to the right, the Ford seemed to weave in and out of the lane. He was trying to erratically cut off the truck, but now even the truck lights were far behind me. I was going about 120 miles an hour, and continued it with no effort, as I am experienced with driving fast, and my adrenaline to flight made it easy. I was still shaking and crying, and the headache became bearable. After about 5 to 10 minutes, I slowed to 80 miles an hour and then 65 miles an hour after about 30 minutes. An hour later, I stopped at a store that appeared to have many customers, which prompted me to stop, as I was paranoid and couldn't be 100% sure the fellow Ford wasn't near me. I went into the store to grab food and coffee, but my appetite was gone, so I decided on coffee and a smoke. Walking into the store, I saw both customers and employees give me a wide-eyed look, followed with a look of sorrow, which made me feel embarrassed. I was shaking, and my makeup had run all over my face from crying, and I'm sure I looked like I was coming down off of drugs, from the fact that my sympathetic nerve was transferring its hard work over to the parasympathetic nerve. I was coming down off the adrenaline. I went to pay for my coffee and request smokes, but the shaking made it hard for me to enter my PIN for my debit card. I had to try it 3 times. Back to the car, I went in fear. My head pounded into my ears. I hoped some tobacco would calm me. The smoke seemed to help me calm down slightly, but the shaking and headache persisted in a bearable manner. The sun was coming up, and I was almost there. I was still shaking and still upset and crying on and off. Of course, when I made it to my boyfriend's, he could sense it and was able to get the truth out of me. I could see he was upset, but he tried to console me with a hug and kiss, an encouraging rest, so I could calm down. It was hard to study that day. The headache persisted, and I stayed in bed. My boyfriend made the decision of me not taking any more late-night drives, and even made sure I stayed in his dwellings until he was off and with me. It's days later, and it's dark out, and I'm scared to go out. I wish I would have listened. 30 or not, no person, male or female, should think it's okay to drive into rural areas at night. There are crazies out there.